Observe as I connect two dots that are seemingly completely unconnectable. Dot 1, flies. Dot 2, torpedoes? There's a quote that says, "To acquire knowledge, one must study, but to acquire wisdom, one must observe." Now, I'm a firm believer in always being observant. I think there's always something interesting going on around us. There's life happening everywhere. And as an embryologist, I'm fascinated by the unseen world that's going on all around us. Which brings me to the reason for this video, story time. One day, I was walking into work, and on the sidewalk, there was a little poor dead honeybee. As an embryologist, I work almost all day long on the microscope. So anytime I see something that might look interesting under the microscope, sometimes I pick it up and I put it under a microscope. It was cool zooming in on all the different parts of the bee, seeing how fuzzy they are. This part I believe is called the proboscis. Insect nerds, you can correct me on that. And then I mounted one of the wings onto a slide, and I saw something that I did not expect. At first I wasn't really sure what all these little dots were. Turns out because I had put a microscope cover slide on top, I was pressing them down. And what they really were hairs. Hairs all over this bee's wings. I had no idea bees had hairs on their wings. So I turned to Google. Turns out there's a name for them. They're called microtrichiae. And as it turns out, many flying insects have these hairs all over their wings. Naturally, my next Google search was, why are there hairs all over these insect wings? Which led me to this paper, How Drainflies Manage to Almost Never Get Washed Away. A very attention-grabbing title. I always love finding random papers that have nothing to do with what I do with work. And this paper was no exception. There were super interesting things in here. A lot of things that went way over my head. They started getting into some calculus here. I believe what they were talking about was the surface tension of water, especially micro droplets, and how the angle of the droplet affects the surface tension. And if I'm understanding the paper right, I'll link the paper in the description. It's super fascinating, so you can take a look at it. But if I'm understanding the paper correctly, the way these microtrichiae work on the wings is that when water hits the wings, instead of the water being able to spread out and soak the wings and make them wet, the water will end up forming these tiny water bee droplets on the microtrichiae. And then when the insect beats their wings, the water just flies right off and the insect's ability to fly isn't affected. Figure 4 here is demonstrating some of these micro droplets. Man, I wish I had access to a electron microscope. These images are super duper zoomed in. These are very teeny tiny microscopic images. So as you can see, water forms these micro droplets on the little hairs, the microtrichiae, instead of wetting the wings. They took some really cool, here we go, these like super slow-mo zoomed in videos of what happens when these drainflies are exposed to droplets of water. Check it out. Water comes in, hits the wing, the fly reacts immediately, flies away. I believe this one is a direct hit of water. Boom! No effect. Completely unbothered. That fly, no problem. Here's another droplet. This one might be the oil. They drop oil on them one time and they show how oil behaves differently than water. Yeah, this one's the oil. See, the poor fly isn't able to fly away on this one. Demonstrating that different fluids are going to behave differently, right? Like water is different than oil. Poor fly. Super cool videos. Take a look at them. This last one, look at this one. This one reminds me of Batman. Somehow they got this fly underwater and then watch, he comes out. Tell me this isn't Batman right here. Just pops right out, unbothered, not wet at all. What? After I read this paper, I got thinking, what led these people at King Abdullah University of Science and Technology out of Saudi Arabia to want to study drainflies not getting wet? What's the backstory on that? So I did some searching and I found one of the authors on LinkedIn. His name is Nathan Spears. Turns out, huge coincidence, Nathan Spears is now an assistant professor at a university just down the road from where I live. So I reached out to him and I was like, hey, this might sound a little bit weird and random, which it is. Anyways, I was wondering if you would be open to just, I don't know, maybe chatting to me about that paper and why you did that paper. Lucky for me, Nathan was super cool. He responded and he was like, sure, I mean, it's been a few years since I wrote that paper, but I guess I'd be happy to talk to you. I was kind of hoping he would invite me to visit his lab, but he's a busy guy. I'm also busy. So we just set up a simple little Zoom call and I got to ask him what led to this paper, why drainflies not getting wet. And this is where he started explaining to me that he's a mechanical engineer who specializes in interfacial fluid dynamics. Basically the way fluids interact with either other fluids or other things like air when they come into contact with each other. He went to more depth about the paper and insects and surface tension, and he started saying math words, and I was like, oh, no way, interesting, all over my head. Now, if you've made it this far into the video, you might be thinking, bro, you mentioned something about torpedoes at the beginning of this video. Let me tie it together here. After his time in Saudi Arabia, Nathan, for a few years, went to the Naval Undersea Warfare Center in Newport, Rhode Island. While there, he carried out some basic research on different objects entering water. He showed me these really cool, super slow-mo videos of dropping like a ball into water and then seeing what happens with the air pockets and how they behave. And while the videos were all really cool, I had to ask him, what was the point of you studying these random different objects being dropped into water while at the Naval Warfare Center? As I understand it, not all torpedoes are fired from submarines. There are torpedoes that are fired from ships, so they start out in the air and then they hit the water. And he explained to me how basic research like this can help us understand other things, such as, you guessed it, what happens when kids like Ham and the Sandlot do giant cannonballs into the pool. Just kidding. Torpedoes! Basic research like that can help develop more technology around naval weapons like torpedoes. So there you have it. Point A, flies. Point B, torpedoes. Connected. One simple dead bee on the sidewalk on the way to work taught me that lots of flying insects have hairs on the wings, why they have hairs on their wings. And now I've made a new contact, a new friend, and somebody who could potentially, I don't know, one day help me get into hobby torpedoing.